let's do some practice problems with weighted averages. I recommend pushing pause, trying the problem, and then coming back and watching it to really just see where you're at in terms of this. So in this one, we have what we call a Likert scale, 1 through 5, right? Strongly disagree, all to strongly agree. And we see how many of each respondents we have. So we want to find, overall, what's the total score. So we want to see, basically, the total scores, so the total scores that were done over the total respondents, number of respondents. So total scores, well, if you think about this, a score of 1, 9 people gave it a score of 1. That's a total of 9. 2 times 15 gave us a 30 total. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 20 is 80. And 5 times 32 is 160. So the total scores, when you add them up, give you 291. Well, how many total respondents? Well, if we add all of these together, we end up with 80. So we would take 291 divided by 80 for a weighted average of 3.6. And yes, I rounded, which, again, if you look at the data over here, 3.6 falls about right here. Well, that makes sense when about more than half the data is above 3.6 and a little bit less than half. So it makes sense, right? It's kind of like right in the middle, which is kind of not exactly the middle, but give it, in the middle there. Okay. Number 2. We have a test, or a class here, and we've got the weights here, and we have the information, there we go, here. Well, you'll notice that there are 3 presentations, so before you can really do anything with weighted averages, you've got to find the category averages. So the category average. So percentages, I'm going to add the 3 together, and I get 205, and I'll divide by 3. So the category averages for presentation, which is 25%, has a category average of 68.33. Then we go to the midterm, which is 20%, category average of 60. We've got a final, 25%, that is an 85. Quizzes, well, if I add them all up, I have 249 divided by 4. So for quizzes, they're 20%, and the category average would be a 62.25. And then attendance. There's 4 of them. 300 divided by 4. So for attendance, it's 10%. I have a 75 average. So for these, we can then find the quality points. So remember, we're going to multiply 0.25 times 68.33. And I get a quality point of 17.1. 0.2 times 60 gives me 12. 0.25 times 85 gives me 21.25. 0.2 times 62.25 gives me 12.45. And then 0.1 times 75 gives me 7.5. When I add these all together to get my overall total, I end up with 70.3, which is a C. And remember, we don't have to divide because the total is 100%, which is just 1, and dividing by 1 doesn't change anything. Number 3, an artist sells 12 portraits for $75, 15 landscapes for $60, and 30 postcards for $5. Based on these sales, what's the average value of the art that he sold? Well, if we've got portraits, right, we've got the counts and we've got the price. So he sold 12 of those for $75. Then we've got landscapes. He sold 15 of those for $60. And we've got postcards, 30 of them for $5. So when you look at this over here, we've got, total money, 12. We're going to multiply these. 12 times 75 gives me 900. 15 times 60 gives me 900. 30 times 5 gives me 150. When I add those together, I get 1950. So that's the total amount taken in for a total of 57 items. So 1950 divided by the 57 items gives me an average price of 34.21. Makes sense that it's a little bit lower because, again, over half of the items were $5. So that's really going to bring the weighted average down. And we've got one more problem. Students applying for a scholarship are given a score out of 10 points in the area of need, application, and interview. Based on the weights and scores in the table, who would win? So when you're looking at this, right, basically for James, we've got to do each one of these separately. We're going to take 9.5 and we're going to multiply by 0.4. We're going to take 6 and multiply by 0.25. We're going to take the 8.2 and multiply by 0.35. And then we're going to add those values together. So do that for each one. Multiply the value of need by 0.4, application by 0.25, and the interview by 0.35. When you do that, you see that James scores an 8.17, Teresa scores an 8.24, Maria scores a 7.23, and Samuel scores an 8.17. So based off of this, our friend Teresa would win the scholarship because she has the highest weighted average when it comes to need, application, and interview based on these weighted averages.